All right, this is the first solo episode I've done in a while. I wanted to start doing, and this came at the suggestion of Luke Lefevre, which is a past guest, is just the last episode of every month. I kind of want it to be a solo episode for a while. A couple of reasons. I want to kind of talk about the thoughts and the lessons I've learned from past guests this month, but also I need to improve my multifacetedness as a podcast host. Yes, the majority of my podcasts are going to be me speaking to guests and guests doing 90% of the speaking. That's the way it should be. But I do want to improve myself as a speaker and somebody who can articulate my thoughts on the fly a little bit better. And I'm very nervous about doing a solo episode for that very reason. I can't hide behind the guise that is a great podcast guest. So you guys are going to get me. I'm not sure what these episodes are going to turn into, but for now they are going to be thoughts, questions. I asked for questions on Instagram, questions I've been thinking about myself and kind of what's going on. And we'll see how that delves and changes. Again, it's only one episode at the end of every month, guys. So I appreciate you listening to me babble and not listening to my guests as much. Hopefully you can get a little bit something out of it. So let's just dive into some questions and we'll see where it goes. One of the questions I got was, how much do you prioritize sleep relative to training, nutrition, and other health inputs? I'm definitely not, I wouldn't consider myself an athlete anymore in any capacity. I don't train. I occasionally work out. I prioritize my sleep more than anything else because it's so pivotal to everything else that I do. It's pivotal to my mood. It's pivotal to the optimism I bring to each day. So I put a lot of impetus and pressure on improving my sleep. I guess pressure is the wrong word. Pressure is the last thing you want to apply to sleep. The more pressure you have, the less likely you are to get good sleep. But I do prioritize my sleep. It is something. It's the first thing that I try to think about when it comes to my health and wellness. That said, the past 2 weeks I went to Boston for Maddie. She did her Boston Marathon. Amazing. It was so fun to watch her do it. That is a race like none other. Hundreds of thousands of people. The whole city shut down. It was a really cool experience. And then the next week, and I did an ultra marathon. I said I very loosely. I kind of just participated. Really, it was my sister Davis who did an ultra marathon. But the reason I bring those up is I got very little sleep on both of those weekends. For the ultra marathon, I was up for 40 hours straight, running it and then helping Davis and then being awake the next day. And what I realize now is I can still perform on little sleep more than what I thought or could do when I was younger. I don't know, maybe it's just I'm putting less pressure on myself and less pressure on the sleep, but that has really been an interesting awakener for me, like an eye-opening moment is like, okay, yes, I'm going to prioritize sleep, but if I don't get it, things can still go well. I can still perform well. So yes, I do prioritize my sleep over my training and nutrition in terms of it's what I think about the most because I feel like it impacts me, but the other two are very important as well. Again, just to tie into that, what are three things that you have that have had the biggest impact on your sleep quality? Cooling down the room, huge. Turning my phone off an hour or so before bed. Not having that constant stimulation or anxiety or desire to check things has been big. And then 3, probably an eye mask. Big eye mask guy. I've gotten my wife into it. I've gotten all my siblings, friends into it. Eye masks are huge. They standardize darkness across the board. So like, yes, I can make my room as optimal as possible. Well, what if I go on vacation or if I have a work trip or if I'm in a hotel? Standardizing that darkness with the eye mask has been huge. So I would highly recommend that. What supplements are actually in your daily stack right now and why each one? It's pretty simple, actually. I take creatine. I take about 10 to 15 grams of creatine a day. I take a high quality fish oil. Fish oil is one that you really want to prioritize when it comes to quality because most are going to be rancid and just not good. They are going to be deteriorated and your body's not going to be able to get a lot out of them. So making sure you get a high quality fish oil, looking for one that has an IFOS certification. That means it's been governed and tested and it's not rancid. And ideally getting one that's cold pressed or has a nitrogen flush again, so it's not being exposed to oxygen. So creatine, fish oil. And then I'm just taking a daily multivitamin. I think the brand I'm using now is Research Labs. It's just from, I'm trying to think, Really, it's just, I take magnesium before bed. So those are really it. And then I take a protein powder. I'm alternating. I have a beef beef isolate, so it's like beef protein powder, and then I just have a standard whey. So those are the ones that I'm taking right now. How does the concept of longevity factor into the decisions you make right now at your age? I think they factor in a lot. And I'm not thinking purely from a physical and a health component. I'm thinking of it as a optimization or podcast career component as well. Usually in my past, I would start to do things and I would think, what is the point of doing this if I'm not doing it to the best of its capability, the best of my capability, and really optimizing it? But the problem is I do everything that way. I can't do it for long. And if that mindset is, I'm going to do everything perfect and the best that I can, and then you miss a day, well, that wasn't perfect. So then I chalk it up as, what's the point? So now I try to make it as consistent as possible. What is the most I can do on my worst day? So if I'm waking up and I'm feeling terrible, I'm not motivated, I don't want to do it, and I didn't sleep good, what is the most I can do reliably and consistently, even on those days? And that's my baseline. And I try to make that as the best it can be to move the needle. And that way, because most days are not going to be my worst day, so I'm always going to be doing a little bit more, but I have that fallback for when those days do occur, I'm still getting what my bare minimum is. And again, I try to make that like be realistic. If on the worst day you're like, I'll still run 10 miles, you're probably not. So it needs to be realistic. So that's how I think about that longevity in terms of my ventures now. The way I think about it physically is, I want to be moving and grooving when I'm 110. I want to be mobile. I want to be physical. I want to still be doing things. I don't want to be tied down to my bed, and I don't want to be reliant on other people. I want to be able to take care of myself. So I am prioritizing, strength training, endurance, nutrition, those things, so I can do that long into my life. But also I'm not moving the heavy weights that I used to before, not because I can't, but they just don't move the needle for me as much. Like I'm not going to be as fit as I was in the past, because I'm not planning on training 6, 7, 8 hours a day. And so what that means is I just want to look good, I want to feel good, and I want to feel good for a long time. So just making sure that I'm moving well, I'm taking care of my body. When you imagine yourself at 70, what do you want to still be able to do, and what are you training for? And are you training for that now? I want to be doing everything. I want to be doing everything that I can do now. Obviously, I'm not going to be doing it at the weight or the speed as I would be now. That's not how the body works, but I want to still be capable of running an ultra marathon. I want to still be capable of hitting a full depth back squat. So for me, again, it's just what I was saying before, prioritizing quality movement, quality standards, nutrition, sleep, and making sure I'm not getting injured. That is the biggest determining factor for the elderly people, is not getting injured. If you can stay healthy, you're going to be that much more consistent going to the gym, that much more consistent on the things that you're doing, and your body is going to be able to maintain its abilities and capabilities for that much longer. So making sure you don't get injured is very, very important. And I do that by knowing my limits, knowing my weights, knowing how my body feels and reacts to certain things, and then not pushing it too far. Again, I still do push things now. Like I'm okay injuring myself to a certain degree now. Like, for example, if I was to run an ultra marathon, I would be okay pushing to the point like where my feet are, starting to blister, toenails are falling off, or I'm hurting, my knees, or I'm getting shin splints or something like that. I'd be okay doing that now, because that's a price I'm willing to pay. But down the line, as I get older, that tolerance is going to change, because again, prioritizing my health so you can continue to do the things that you want to do is of the utmost importance. What made you start the Chase Merrill podcast, and what did the earliest version of it look like? Well, you can go look. They're all up there. All the video, everything is on Spotify, YouTube, except for my very first one, because I didn't have video set up for that one. So it's all there. You can go look. And what made me start it is, and this is funny. I actually always I talk to my guests about this before we actually hit record. So there's, some back and forth, just getting to know each other, how people talk or how they talk. So I know when to jump in or when to interrupt, because if they tend to have like long pauses and then speak again, I don't want to interrupt during that long pause if they were planning on keeping going. So there's a lot of conversation that actually happens before we hit record, just so I can get to learn them a little bit more. But what I always say to them is the reason why I started the podcast is like I'm an OG podcast listener. I've been listening to podcasts since I was in high school, like OG Tim Ferriss, all these great podcasts, Rich Roll, Stephen Bartlett, Modern Wisdom. You've got phenomenal podcast hosts, but you also have not so good podcast hosts. And to me, what a not so good podcast host is it's somebody who has a lot of pre-scripted questions. They ask the guest a question, the guest gives an amazing answer, an answer that deserves more introspection and interrogation and pulling apart and follow-up questions. And the podcast host just moves on to the next of the pre-scripted questions. So always what I say to my guests is, this is not a scripted podcast. I don't have written out questions for you. I do a lot of research prior. I try to get to know you, your work, what you have going on. And then it's just a genuine conversation with somebody on a topic that I'm actually interested in. So the reason why I wanted to do that is I wanted to be in control of the questions. Like, yes, there are great podcast hosts who do ask follow-up questions, but they're maybe not the ones that I would have asked or I wanted to know. So I will put myself in that driver's seat and I'll ask those questions myself if that's what it takes. And hopefully, there are going to be people who are listening to me and saying, oh, you didn't ask the next question that I would have asked. Start your own podcast. Do it. That's what I did. And I'm talking to a lot of cool people. But I do still have a lot of work. That's not me saying that I am at the pinnacle of what a good podcast host is. I know I'm not, but that's where I want to go. And that's the reason why I started it. What was the hardest part of the first year? The craft, the consistency, or the lack of audience? Well, we are in the first year. Or I guess we've just passed the first year. We're like 14 months in. The craft, the consistency, or the lack of audience? It depends. It depends on what your goal is for starting it. If your goal for starting it is to have the biggest podcast, then yeah, the lack of audience is going to suck because that's the goal. But that wasn't my goal. My goal was to talk to cool people so I could better my life or better understand life. So for me, the lack of audience wasn't that big, except for the fact that it limited the guests that I could bring on because I wasn't able to show them any consistent value or past guests that I've had. Now that I've had a lot of amazing guests and I have more amazing guests coming, it gives me proof of concept. So I'm able to reach out to guests and say, hey, these are who I've had on. I'd love to have you on. And so that is the only way the lack of audience hurt me. The craft, I would say, was the biggest for me. Like I've said before, I have a tendency to not do something unless it can be done the best it can be. But the only way to get better at being a podcast host is to be a podcast host. So I'd have to ask terrible questions or listen to myself stutter and say ums and buts. And as I've said before, not be concise because I'm so concerned about what other people will think or if they'll take the question the wrong way. So now I've really had to work on just being concise, being, precise in what I want to say and not say it in the most roundabout way. Just be clear, be cut, and let the guests take it where they want to go. So for me, improving my craft has been very big. How do you measure success at this stage? Downloads, relationships, personal growth, something else? Yeah, I measure success as improvement in my craft. If I listened to my last episode and it was better than my first episode, or if it was better than the episode before that, that is success to me. I've gotten amazing guests. I'm getting more amazing guests. The views and the downloads and everything will come. But I don't think they should come or they deserve to come if I don't work on myself. The last thing I would want is to waste my listeners' time or to waste the guest's time. And so that's something I think about the most is how can I improve the questions that I ask? How can I improve the way I ask my questions? How can I improve the quality of the show? Everything that goes into improving a podcast. If it's better this next episode than it was before, that's a success to me. I was actually talking to my wife the other day and she said this was really interesting, but I was like, the best compliment I get ever, full stop, is when my guests say that's a really good question, or I haven't asked that before, or what an interesting question. That gets me like, I don't care if you compliment me, say, whatever it is, that is the best compliment that I've ever received. And it's the one that really just makes me the most happy. So that's how I can kind of tell, like, I'm very passionate and want to improve this, is I'm working on it so much and I think about it all the time. So improving my craft is definitely how I measure success right now. What is one thing you wish someone had told you before you hit record for the first time? Nothing. I don't really think there was anything that anybody would tell me. I figured out everything on my own. Figured out how to create, lists, or I figured out how to find a host provider, a platform provider to host the podcast, and then how to push it out to all the platforms. I figured out how to create my own thumbnail, my podcast cover. Everything has been learned. I figured out how to edit my audio. Everything has been learned and figured out on my own. And because of that, I'm very independent and it can run. Like, for me, the podcast is not as good as it can be. Like, ideally it would be in person. I'd have, a whole team to edit all these amazing clips and to make things as good as they can be. But I think it's pretty good now, like myself not included. I can still improve, but the production is decent. And for me, that is relieving. Like, if my house was to catch on fire, if I was to lose everything, I could easily recreate it and set it up myself. So I was able to learn and discover everything myself. And for me, that provides a certain degree of independence and allows me to recreate what I have here anywhere. What makes your guest outreach stand out, or at least not get ignored? They do. For me, one of the things that I do that is my bare minimum, like I was saying before, the most I can do even on my worst day, is I do a minimum of 5 guest outreaches a day. And for me, that actually does take a lot of time, because I'm not just reaching out to anybody. I'm actually reaching out to people, like I said, that I want to talk to, that provide value to me, that are important. So I do a lot of research prior, and I reach out to 5 people a day. And if I'm reaching out to, a consistent amount of people, eventually they're going to get back to me. A certain percentage is. And for me, what makes it reach out is what I initially started doing is I'd send like these long emails and paragraphs, like, this is what I want to talk to you. This is why I think I would be a good host for you. I want to talk about all this. I'm interested in that. Now it's very simple. It's like four or 5 sentences. It's like, hey, my name's Chase. I'm a podcast host. I talk to people I'm interested in learning from. Period. I think you'd be a great fit. There's a lot of questions that I'd love to ask you. These are some of my past guests. Is sent. Like, very, very simple. Because I don't want to burden them with the responsibility of having to read a long message from somebody they don't know. If I can make it as simple as possible, digestible, they can click on it, read it in 10 seconds, get the gist. That is how I get the most response. Have you handled rejection from guests you really wanted? It's easy. For larger guests, the return on their time is not quite there yet. The podcast is not the biggest podcast in the world. It's not, top 10 on Spotify or anything like that. So I don't blame them. Their time is very, very valuable. And I am understanding of that. That's why I put so much time and effort into prep if they do say yes. So I don't hold it against them for not spending their valuable time in a way that they don't see a return yet. So I just save those. I file them away, and I understand that I'm going to come back later once it is maybe a little bit more value for the time and when I can secure them. I don't take anything personally with this podcast, and that frees it up to be better and improve. How do you prepare for a guest interview in a way that honors your time and your audience? Reading, listening to past interviews, watching YouTube videos of past interviews, anywhere they are. Deep dive. So I'll, scour the web, go to websites, go to things like that. But I also use AI. Like, I initially kind of held some grievances, like, this might be cheating using AI. But I don't now, because I don't use AI to create any questions. I just use it to help research my guests. I feed in their websites, their Instagram, past podcasts, and I just ask them to help me construct the timeline and things like that to help understand. So I don't think there's absolutely no reason for me not to use AI. So it's a lot of that. It compiles a brief that I read through, and then I'm listening to the podcast. I'm reading their books, things like that. Content creation as a long game. How do you think about building an audience when you're still in the early stages? If you build it, they will come. That's the quote. I talking to people that I'm interested in on topics that I'm interested in. If people are interested in those topics, they will come and listen. Not because they want to listen to me, but because they want to listen to the people who are interesting and experts in those topics. If you want to learn more about the carnivore diet, why would you not listen to Dr. Anthony Chaffee talk about the carnivore diet? He's the carnivore MD. That's what he talks about. So I don't really think about it that way. I think about bringing guests that I'm interested in. And if people are interested, they will come as well. All right. This is going to be a super short one. I unfortunately am running out of time today. The podcast is not my only job right now, as much as I wish it would be. And hopefully it will be soon. Hopefully this will be able to provide all the money that I can use to live on. But I do still have a day job right now. Unfortunately, that is calling. So I am excited to do this again next month. We'll do it a lot longer. I'll have a lot more questions. I'll have a lot more thoughts, but I also did not want to weigh you guys down with something that maybe wasn't as good as it could be quite yet. So hopefully you guys can enjoy this style, and hopefully next one will be a little bit better and a little bit longer. But until then, I've got about 8 guests already recorded, ready to come out for all of May. And I've got a bunch more lined up to talk with in May and in June. So we've got a really good lineup, and I can't wait for you guys to listen to them. Thank you so much for sticking around, listening to me. Like, subscribe, do all that stuff. I really appreciate it.